Okay. Can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
I can.
Yes.
So welcome to our April Active Transportation Advisory Committee. I am Jen Saponis from the Capital District Transportation Committee. I'm just going to read down the participant list and make sure I have everyone. Ivan Vamos, Ethan Warren, John Mitchell, Charles Welge, Jim Levy, Edward Davidson, Linda Vonderheide, Sam Morial, Valerie Dean, Rogerio Rodriguez, Carrie Ward, Jennifer Hogan, David Wooden, and Lindsay Brad. Did I miss anybody? Great. So today we have a presentation on ADA transition plans. Then we'll hear from CDTA on the status of CDP, P-Cycle, and Scoot. And then we have some other general CDTC updates to go over. And then our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 10th. It's Bike Month, and traditionally we have met somewhere in person outside of the CDTC office. We haven't identified a location or a project that we want to highlight or tour yet, but as soon as we do, I will keep everyone updated. I just want to, before we get into the presentation, I did want to update everyone on the CDTC COVID-19 policies. The biggest change since we last met is that now all of our meetings are hybrid. So we will be having meetings here in the office and providing a Zoom link for anyone who would prefer. We do have meeting technology that lets people participate both ways and still have a good interactive experience. So I hope that I do see some of you soon here in the office as we try to make this shift. But other than that, we are, nothing else has changed. So Carrie, I will make you a co-host, and then you should be able to share your screen.
What are you looking at?
I can see, well, actually, hold on. I need to. Well, we should ask everyone on the Zoom what they're looking at, actually.
ICMPO involvement in.
Yes, but we see your notes.
You do see the notes?
Yeah.
All right, how about now?
Yep, all good.
Okay. So this is actually a presentation that I provided to an FHWA training last year on MPO involvement in municipal ADA transition plans. So I guess I was assuming that you guys all knew what a transition plan was, but in case you don't, a transition plan, an ADA transition plan is a document that lays out the condition of your existing infrastructure, and to the extent that it's not fully ADA accessible, how you're going to bring it into compliance, notably including a schedule for those improvements. Most municipalities in our region have one from the 90s, which is when the ADA was passed. But the standards for sidewalks really didn't exist at a national level anyways until 2011. They're actually not standards. They're still draft. However, the last I heard from Federal Highway Administration was that they are expected now to be adopted in October of this year. So this is just kind of the beginning of our involvement here in these. There was a training in 2014, and some of the municipalities in our region became concerned that they weren't in compliance, and they wanted to try and do things in concert with each other because there was concern from some municipalities about the comparative impact on taxes and economic development if they were to put a bunch of effort into bringing pedestrian infrastructure into compliance and their neighbors were to ignore it. So we had established a transition plan working group. It was supposed to be a one-year effort, and we just really wanted to research how to do a transition plan. So the funding, financing, inventory methods, there was a lot of concern about snow clearance. And then at the time, the difference between ADAG, which are the current standards, which really don't apply to sidewalks, and PROAG there. We also surveyed municipalities just to understand what they were doing and whether they had a transition plan. And we created a transition plan template for municipal use at that time as well. So what we learned as when we did the municipal surveys was that most of the municipalities in the region didn't actually have a data set of their sidewalk locations. So we did that. It took us 3.5 years, and we created a data set that is pretty simple. It just has the route number, if there is a route number for the road name, what side of the road the sidewalk is on, the surface type, which is asphalt, concrete, a little bit of brick or slate, and then the length of the segment, which may not be from intersection to intersection because a lot of places the driveways break the sidewalks. There might be a whole bunch of segments on one block. And then we transmitted that data with a letter explaining transition plan requirements to each municipality. So if you are working with a municipality or in a municipality and you're interested in that data, the first thing you should do is contact that municipality and ask them if they can share it with you. If you need assistance identifying who it was that we sent it to, feel free to contact me about that or Teresa LaSalle in our office. You've probably seen this before. This is just an image of the sidewalk locations that came out of that data collection effort. We did review a whole lot of transition plans. At this time, there was a wide variety of specificity in them. At the time, the Federal Highway Administration was advising us and municipalities in the state to just do what Ontario County did, which is really not anything. They just said what they were going to do. So it put down in paper and an adopted document that they planned to do a transition plan, and that put a timeline to when they were going to do their condition inventory and when they were going to have an actual transition plan that laid out the barriers that are existing and when they were going to fix them. So that the question of the condition methodology still remained at that time. So we did have to figure out, what elements we wanted to score. In the end, we decided that we were going to do sidewalks, curb ramps, crosswalks, pedestrian signals, multi-use paths, and bus stops at for the bus stops that are along sidewalks. The format of the data was a topic of discussion because it's much easier to do it electronically using apps on a tablet, but we wanted to make sure, first of all, that we were not, to the extent possible, using proprietary applications that weren't going to be supported in the future. And then we wanted to make sure that we were able to pull down whatever data we got into like a spreadsheet or something on paper that was easy for municipalities that don't have, that have limited technology to be able to use, especially municipalities that don't have a large pedestrian infrastructure network. So the data points that you're going to collect are, like, the more data points that you collect, the longer it's going to take you to collect the data. So while you may have a tendency to want to be really exact and collect everything you need, you have to keep in mind that that's going to take you longer. And assuming that your infrastructure is really not in compliance, it's going to take you a long time to bring it into compliance. And by the time you get to all of the pieces of infrastructure, you're going to have to go back out and inventory, at the time that you're making the improvement, exactly what needs to be improved. So it really doesn't need to be all that exact. High-tech options do make things a lot faster, but they also dramatically increase the skill of the data collectors and the expense. We learned that when we released an RFP for consultant assistance. So we did recommend following the state DOT's method, which they only had for sidewalk surface condition, which was really simple, and trying to keep it that simple for the other elements that we were going to inventory as well. And we did learn from 3 municipalities in our region that had already started their own inventories, and the image at the right is from the Bethlehem system. The purple lines are the sidewalks that we had provided them, and then they went out and collected the locations of the curb ramps and the crosswalks, which are both dots in this system because the data collection system that they were using only had the capacity to make points and not lines. So the common trends that we saw was that people are using tablets for field collection. It's much easier if you have a data plan, because then you can have 2 people out at the same time without inadvertently collecting data on the same piece of infrastructure. And it's important to simplify the data points that you're collecting and be really clear about the tools and equipment that are necessary and try to keep those to a minimum. And if you can keep it simple, interns work really well for this task. So we initially released an RFP for consultant assistance to help us help municipalities create transition plans in January of 2020. In those, we requested data collection methodology proposal, but we did strongly suggest that they use the 1 to 5 or 1 to 4 scale that NISPOT was using for sidewalks. But we asked them to propose the data collection methodology for the other data elements. And we did specify that public input was going to be a municipal responsibility. And that at the time we had allocated $75,000 over 2 years, which was an estimate of at least 2 municipalities, which was loosely based on the municipalities in the region that had already done data collection, kind of extrapolating out from the number of miles of sidewalks that they had. We've since learned that, that's a helpful measure, but the density of the blocks is also really important because all of the data that you have to collect at an intersection, takes longer than walking along a sidewalk segment. So we did only receive 3 proposals at the time, which was at that time, a pretty low number for us. We noticed again in those proposals that there was a tendency for exactness and like really high tech, data intensive collection methodologies. But we were, we had been pretty clear that we were seeking simplicity in them. And the image at the right is, we had included in the RFP, and this is out of NISDOT's, it's part of NISDOT's descriptions and imagery that they were using to describe the few categories that they were using to assign scores to sidewalk segments. So this image, this actually shows a point in time that is not recent of the Saratoga Springs data collection. So the colors are meaningless. It's just where they were, whether the data was collected or not for that segment or that point. But I wanted to include it because I think it helps to understand how high of a density of data points and lines we're talking about when we're adding all of these elements on top of each other. So the municipal solicitation that we've already released, we released in April of 2020. We are planning on releasing another solicitation before the end of this calendar year. Up to now, we have been requiring in-kind match. So, that municipalities document the time, or that they do spend time working on the project and document it. Cash match has been optional. So there's no required cash match. We've been trying to be accessible to lower income communities. Some of them have a pretty large sidewalk network. And then municipalities are responsible for arranging public input and providing a list of stakeholders at the time of application. We really want to make sure that we're thinking about that from the beginning of the project. And then a letter of support from the chief elected official to make sure that there's at least an intent to adopt the transition plan once it's finished. In 2020, we worked with the town of Glenville. That transition plan is finished and it's up on their website, and the city of Saratoga Springs, which is, the consultants are currently putting together the actual draft document, and we anticipate that will be discussed at a city council meeting in May. So as part of the municipal process that we have been doing, with the municipality, we have been asking about what I've called here non-data collection components. Those are, your ADA coordinator in the municipality, whether you have a public notice and a grievance procedure. They probably existed at some point, but if municipalities want to just redo them, we can do that as part of this project. Stakeholder meetings, it's important to invite groups focusing on seniors. Many of them don't identify as people who have a disability, but then if you ask them about their abilities, they'll tell you that they have a disability. We're providing technical training to whoever is collecting the data, which it has been a lot of interns of consultant that the consultants are paying. However, the systems that we're using are can be useful for data collection for other things. The town of Glenville found it helpful to have their staff trained in doing data collection as part of this project because they thought they could use it, similar technology and that knowledge to collect other kinds of data that they need. And then either public meetings or just an agenda item on an existing public meeting. So what we're doing, what we've found for the hardware and software to collect the data is that a device that has internet and a data plan and the GPS are really helpful. That's what we've been using. You do need ArcGIS online credentials for what we are the way that we're doing it, we've been using ArcGIS Collector and Survey 123. One of those changed to field maps fairly recently. So the data collection points that we've been doing, which our consulting team developed in-house with the exception of the sidewalks piece, are the curb ramps, whether there's detectable warning and the dimensions of those and the contrast of them, light on dark or dark on light. Pedestrian signals, what type there is, whether it's visual or audible or both, and then the access to the control to request the pedestrian phase on the signal. Transit stops, there's requirements for the access dimensions. So basically, if you're at the transit stop, the dimensions of the, like a concrete pad right there to be able to get up onto the bus. And then crosswalks, the surface that you're walking on when you're on the crosswalk, not the paint. So lessons that we learned as part of this process is that, if you're going to do a transition plan, you might want to read Title II of the ADA. We've had a lot of confusion that just kind of repeatedly comes up about the difference between ADA compliance and planning. Basically, if something doesn't exist, it doesn't have to be accessible. There are some things in ProAg that are a little bit different than ADAG, and it's much more comprehensive for sidewalks and for pedestrian infrastructure. Notably, again, that has caused a lot of confusion for multiple people is that paint does not a crosswalk make, except in very rarely does the paint determine that there is a crosswalk there. Simple is going to be more doable. The more difficult you make it, the less likely it is it's going to happen in terms of collecting the data. There have been a lot of requests over time about some kind of notification from an enforcement agency. Essentially, municipal staffs have said it would be easier for them to get approval or resources to work on a transition plan if somebody that has some enforcement authority over the municipality tells them that they need to do it. As you probably know, there's jurisdictional issues among levels of government, but also with private property owners. And then the project in general has provided some opportunities to educate people. I can skip that. And that's all I have.
Carrie.
Stop sharing.
Does anyone have any questions about the ADA transition plans or the process?
If I can have a comment on it, first, thank you. It looks like a very nice, a very useful project, Gary. I'm going to recommend adding to that at some point multi-use road shoulders, which are available in many of the areas not covered by sidewalks and not likely to be covered by sidewalks, but are indeed used by ADA people, including my wife now. And the added benefit is these things tend to be plowed. So sometimes people are on the shoulder, even if there is a sidewalk next to it, which has had all the snow plowed onto it, such as Shaker Road in Colony. So the shoulders are very important. They're useful for that if they are properly paved and properly marked. And they happen to be also good for bicycling and other uses. I see the postman on the same sidewalk as I try to walk with my wife. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Simon.
Carrie, Ethan asked how this might relate to paratransit. Or if it does.
I mean, I think if people, if to the extent that people are getting, are receiving eligibility, STAR eligibility based on inaccessibility of existing sidewalk networks, and a transition plan leads to correcting those deficiencies, then it could reduce the number of people that may be eligible for a STAR. They may then be able to ride the fixed route.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my mic wasn't working last call. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, not sure if we would leverage it, but I guess I just sort of wanted to mention that might be some value that CDTA would get out of it as well. But that's exactly what I was thinking, is it could affect trip eligibility.
Thanks. I might follow up with you on that later in terms of the prioritization process that municipalities have to set out in their transition plan. I didn't cover that in the presentation, but you have to do a condition of inventory of what you have and the condition of it, but also lay out how you plan to decide which elements you're going to fix first. And there's usually it's strongly, at least strongly suggested that you prioritize things like the library and city hall and the kind of public services, hospitals, over like loaded city residential areas, but there's some latitude within that. So high density STAR ridership locations is not something that we had thought about. It's an interesting way to look at it.
And if there are any new planners, local municipal planners that are not familiar with Cdtc's sidewalk data set, definitely reach out. We'd be happy to send that. We created a number of the data packages. We continue to collect additional infrastructure data. So if you are looking for data for planning purposes, please feel free to reach out. Any last questions for Carrie?
Jen, or Jerry, I'll put a question: any opportunities for student volunteer groups to participate in sidewalk inventories? We haven't looked into that. We have been using student interns that are paid. We did actually look at using some groups of people who have disabilities as volunteers and training them on data collection and using them in the inventory that we're working on now. And it just became, it didn't seem like training 60 people for one day of data collection was going to be a good use of the consultant's time. But I do still think that I'm interested to find some synergy, particularly with groups of people who have disabilities and transition plan inventory collection, and just understanding the process that municipalities are undertaking or should be undertaking. And I think that could be similar with student volunteer groups as well.
All right. If anyone has questions on the ADA transition plans or is interested in doing one, definitely reach out to Carrie, and we'll continue to provide updates to the advisory committee on ADA transition plan and any new guidance that might come out on ADA compliance. And
Yes, and if you're interested in the Saratoga Springs one, that will be, we should have something on that in May.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Um, sorry. Okay, I think everyone can see the screen.
Yes,
Yep.
Um, Great. So the next agenda item is the tip. And the last time we met, we thought that we would be, that we would have begun programming already. However, there have been a lot of unexpected issues and waiting on the New York State budget. So the tip programming has not yet begun. However, there is a lot more information available to the public and to you now than there was last time. So on the Cdtc tip page and on the planning committee page, you can now find the project candidate lists, and the lists are classified by their project type. So there's pavement beyond preservation, pavement preservation, bicycle and pedestrian preservation, bridge preservation, and intersection safety and other. So when we say preservation versus beyond preservation, preservation is largely maintenance. There are opportunities in those to do some minor enhancements, but for the most part, those are maintenance projects. And beyond preservation is reconstruction, it's redesigning, it's adding new facilities. The fact sheets for each project can also be viewed and downloaded, and the funding allocations are now available. So as everyone has probably been following, the bipartisan infrastructure law, what we're calling bill, did provide more funding for transportation infrastructure. So how will this affect the capital region or New York State? The New York State increase in funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law was about 52%, which is, and what we see at Cdtc is about a 13% increase from the 2019 TIP funding. However, there are a lot of other things that we still need to factor before we can start programming any new funds. And this includes what we're calling the roll-in. So the roll-in are projects that were on the 2019 TIP that have not yet been obligated for funding. So we have about $86 million in projects that have not been obligated yet. So that after that, what we really see is about a 3.3% increase in funding for the region. And there's other, reasons for the limited increase. There, you may have heard of several really big highway infrastructure projects at the state level, like some highway removal projects, Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, some projects downstate, and a lot of the funding for those is coming from the bill, about $4.2 billion. So that kind of comes off of the top of New York State's funding. Also inflation and other COVID-related issues like the availability of some construction materials, labor issues, and project delays. So what we'll have is about $292 million available for new projects and programs. And as you can see, we received over $400 million in funding requests. We received 19 bicycle and pedestrian project proposals. As a category, it was the largest, it was the highest number of proposals. totaling about $35 million. So I'm just going to briefly go through these. These are the Biped project candidates. I'm encouraging you to, and we'll make these available in the notes and send these to everybody. But I would encourage everyone to download these sheets and take a look at them. We're not today going to really comment on the projects. I just want to provide this information to you for you to see the process that we're going through. These are the proposed projects. And on these sheets, there's the project score. So we're showing after these projects went through Cdtc's evaluation process, this is how they scored. So, and they are listed by their in rank order from their score. And just because they have a high score doesn't necessarily mean they'll be programmed. There's other things that happen during programming, but the scores do influence how the planning committee identifies projects to be prioritized for the TIP. So the town of Glenville proposed the Freeman's Bridge Road multi-use path, second phase. There is the Craig Street connector. So this is Craig Street from Emmett Street to Wiley Street. And this focuses on the implementation of complete streets there. The Schenectady Park connector expansion in the city of Schenectady, which includes the construction of a multi-use path. And this is an extension of a path that was completed under the previous TIP that ends at the casino building. You may remember a few years ago, the advisory committee met and we actually rode on that new trail. The city of Saratoga Springs pedestrian ADA traffic signal improvement project, which includes 12 intersections in the city's downtown. Schenectady's Grand Boulevard pedestrian safety accessibility improvement project. The city of Cohoes Bedford Street pedestrian accessibility enhancements. The Cherry Avenue extension multi-use path in the town of Bethlehem. The East Old State Road sidewalk project in the town of Guilderland. The Gilligan Road side path and multimodal enhancements project from the town of East Greenbush. An extension to the northern part of the Zim Smith Trail in Saratoga County. The town of Guilderland's Towasantha Parks Biped path. Pedestrian connections in the village of Voorheesville. The Clarksville Hamlet pedestrian safety project in the town of New Scotland in Albany County. The East Side Safe Routes to School project in the city of Saratoga Springs. Town of Guilderland's Willow Street sidewalk project. Gun Club Road sidewalk project in the town of Guilderland and Carmen Road sidewalk project in the town of Guilderland and the Westerlo multi-use.
Not bad. Carl?
Somebody,
Sure.
okay, please remember to stay muted if you're not.
I've just
talking.
muted everybody who wasn't muted.
Thank you, Carrie. So I know I just kind of ran through those projects, but these project, the candidate list can now be downloaded from the Cdtc website. So you can take a look, get more details on these projects. You can see on the candidate list which funding sources they're eligible for. You can see the cost benefit score, their total points, their cost, and other information. So I encourage everyone to take a look at those. The next steps for the TIP, again, we have not begun programming yet. As of last week, we were waiting on the New York State budget to be passed, but it has been passed. So we're moving forward, and there is a planning committee scheduled for April 20th. At that meeting, the committee will decide on funding of what we're calling multi-site block funded projects and programs. This is formally known as our set aside. So there used to be a bicycle and pedestrian network set aside. You may now see that referred to as a Biped multi-site project or block funded project or program. We don't have too much information on that yet, but that's how those will be addressed. And then, of course, how much funding will be set aside for local, both state and local projects, and then staff will be presenting some funding options, and that will be presented to planning committee. There'll be discussion, and then they'll decide on not necessarily the projects, but what the program will look like as far as how funds will be programmed. Will there be X number of funds for X type of project, or how will they go about doing the programming? There'll be another meeting on May 4th. And then depending upon how much progress is made with programming, there may be an additional meeting in mid-May. And then policy board, which typically meets the first Thursday of June, has been postponed to June 16th to allow for our minimum public review period. Now, we mentioned last meeting that we have amended our public participation policy for public review periods, specifically for the TIP and some of our other regional long-range planning initiatives, mostly because we have so many more tools available to us, and with more things being virtual, we understand we still have to do some in-person and not virtual outreach, but with that virtual option, we're able to reach more people, and we can do it faster. We're not sending out or faxing things to newspapers. We can communicate with people pretty quickly. So we thought that a 25-day public review period as a minimum was fair, and our policy still requires us to do a thorough and comprehensive and continuous process. So we will always do more when we have time, and we'll always be as comprehensive and innovative as we can. So moving that meeting out to later in June allows for that public review period. We'll have a virtual option. We'll also have some in-person open house, have some pop-up types of public opportunities. It also allows for the air quality conformity determination and public review. That's something that also happens here at Cdtc. And then if we do get any comments that significantly, change kind of the opinion about a project or influence the programming process, it gives us some time to edit the TIP and then address any other issues. Does anyone have any questions about the TIP? I know that's a lot of information, and then this is not how it typically, goes. Usually we probably have a draft TIP by now, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands where we're at and knows that they will have an opportunity to weigh in and provide comment during the public review period. Okay. So if Lindsay is, I think Lindsay's still on. Lindsay, would you be so kind to give us an update on the next season of CDPHP cycle and Scoot?
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Good morning, everybody. So we are very close to launching our 6th season of CDPHP cycle. We had a little bit of a delay with the new controllers, the new technology that we've been telling everybody is coming on the bikes for this season. They got shipped from overseas, and just with the general way that shipping is working these days, we were a little held up coming overseas, then to California, now back to New York. So We're hoping to have those in our hands and swapped out onto the bikes by our operations team, and then get the bikes rolling probably the second half of next week is where we're looking right now. Our team is going to get those new controllers on literally as soon as we can get them out of the boxes and onto the bikes. So, we're just, we're antsy, but obviously we have to wait till we get this new technology. It'll be a better launch for the season overall if we wait and put the controllers on rather than having to do it once we already launched the system. I think it will make everything a little bit smoother just to wait. So we're going to hold off one more week and hopefully get the season going later next week. New expansion that we can announce. CDPHP cycle will this season now be in Manans and Waterville Elite. Good thing about this, other than more bikes, more riding area, is we now can continue the riding system along the bike trail and go up through Manans, through Waterville Elite, and we'll connect that all the way over to Cohoes. So our network is now one continuous unit as opposed to having some breaks in it, which we're super excited about. We're going to start the season with over 400 bikes. And then mid to late summer, we're expecting a shipment of 150 e-bikes. If that stays on track, we'll start getting those into the fleet as well, which will put us over 500, which is very exciting for us. Since we started this program 6 years ago with 160 bikes to now be over 500 with e-bikes is big for us. We're excited about it. Moving on to Scoot, we're still on track to launch Scoot probably early summer. We still want to let the bikes get out on the road and get all of our new expansion areas, kind of get their feet under them, get our operations team set and ready. And then we will get the scooters on the road. We're aiming for Albany, Troy, and Schenectady again this year. We've also had some good conversations with the new leadership up in city of Saratoga. So Mayor Kim was interested in kind of doing, at least starting off with the pilot program like we did here in the other 3 cities last summer. So we're working with the team up in Saratoga to start organizing some closed course demonstrations for people to have a chance to ride the scooters, and then get scooters on the road, hopefully up there with their approval with the rest of the season this summer. So exciting stuff. Big news on the cycle side. We're excited to launch. We're just waiting for the new technology to get here, and as soon as it does, bikes will be on the road ready to go.
Thanks, Lindsay. And apologies, I don't know what happened to my slides. This slide should have gone before the tip update, but
Totally fine.
thanks, Lindsay.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. So I know we talked about the capital coexistence, next generation of capital coexist grants last meeting, and we were aiming to release program information by April 1st. We've had some setbacks. Mostly I was out of the office unexpectedly, and our ongoing computer drama, but we are working to get this out very soon. We have 3 programs kind of carved out within the grant program. We're still keeping 20,000 reserved for demonstration projects or pop-up types of quick builds. $5,000 to support bike skill, safety training, and maintenance workshops. And then we've reserved $15,000 for local law enforcement to do bicycle and pedestrian safety events. And we have already received requests and people looking and interested in this next round. So we'll keep everyone updated as those program guidelines are released. Rima, do you want to give us an update on Bike to Work and Ditch the Car?
Yes. So if I could share my screen. Do you think I could share my screen?
I'll make you co-host.
I'm not currently co-host.
Trying to figure out. Okay. You should be able to share. your
Super.
screen.
So can everybody see these posters? Just wanted to
Yes.
give a quick little update on Bike to Work and the Walk and Roll to School Day development. So we are hard at work behind the scenes to launch registration for the Bike to Work Challenge, which is going to be held on Wednesday, June 1st. And the registration for that is slated to be open this Friday, on April 15th. So look out for that. And we're going to be doing email blasts and social media to let everybody know that they'll be, that registration will be open for that in the coming days. And we've organized an information session for April 29th from 12 to 1 p.m. It's going to be a Zoom meeting, just a little lunch session with past Bike to School event organizers to just get them to sort of walk people through, sort of the ins and outs and what goes into organizing an event like that. And we're putting together a toolkit. So we'll introduce the toolkit to the attendees, and so that people hopefully get a little bit of a better idea on what goes into organizing an event like that. So that's going to be on April 29th, and we're aiming to hold the Capital Region Walk and Roll to School Day sort of regional event on June 1st as well. And those are those updates. Back to you, John.
Does anyone have questions about the Bike to Work Day and upcoming events, walk and roll? Our advisory committee email list will definitely be included, and everyone gets contacted once registration opens up. So.
Absolutely.
What's that, Rima?
I was just agreeing with you that we will definitely email the advisory committee.
Okay. So our virtual learning series for New Visions continues. We did have to cancel last month's webinar again because I had some unexpected stuff come up, but the next few months are planned. Next Tuesday we have 3 really good presenters on our panel who will talk about resiliency planning, both things that are happening outside the region, things that are happening at the state level, and then things that are happening right here in the capital region. And this is really kind of like a primer for Cdtc's resiliency and security initiatives that we are planning for this fiscal year. So collecting data and identifying vulnerable infrastructure and preparing to outline a scope and understand what we need to do a regional climate adaptation plan for the next fiscal year. So I think that next Tuesday's webinar will be really useful and valuable. And if you're an AICP, there are free CM credits available. And May's webinar will focus on bicycle and pedestrian planning resources because it's bike. The linkage and other Cdtc study status spreadsheet is also available. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but we have a number of linkage projects that are coming, that are wrapping up. And then we have a number that are just getting started. So if you're interested in those, definitely take a look at our spreadsheet. In addition to linkage, we have our community planning and technical assistance program, which was also just approved for a new round this fiscal year. So CDTC and CDRPC are accepting new technical assistance project proposals. And that information is on our website. And then, of course, other CDTC planning initiatives like the bus lane feasibility study, the Pedestrian Creek Greenway feasibility study, which is also in its final months and wrapping up. And we're really excited to do some public outreach on that. And some other regional projects like the Smart Communities Toolkit and the truck parking study and other data collection initiatives. So one thing that I wanted to mention is that CDTC's newsletter, it used to be something that we prepared quarterly, we printed and we mailed out to people, and you may have been on our mailing list and received it. We are shifting to an e-newsletter. So you may have received our first e-news edition. It's still called In Motion. We're trying to keep it brief and have a lot of interesting stuff, have more contact with people more regularly. You can subscribe. There is a subscribe. If you go to the newsletter on the CDTC website, you can subscribe, but I'll put information in today's meeting notes on how you can subscribe to make sure that you are getting our e-newsletter to your inbox every time it is released. So again, the next meeting is May 10th, and it's Bike Month. So we would love to get out either on a new trail or some other bicycle or pedestrian facility that has been constructed in the last couple of years. And if you are willing to organize like a tour or just a discussion in your community on a project, that would be great. But I'll be reaching out to some folks so that we can set something up and get information out to people as soon as possible. Charles, is your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the issue. Anecdotally, people have been commenting publicly about the Latham traffic circle. And I'm wondering if CDTC had any comments or reactions to the concern about pedestrian safety there.
So I have seen some stuff in the news about the Latham circle, but we haven't been included, or no one has reached out to us yet about that.
Okay.
But it definitely, if there's someone who has questions, or you think there's something that CDTC can assist with, definitely send them our way. I'd be happy to talk to somebody.
I was going to say, if there are any intent or initiatives, the Albany County Department of Health, we've got public health educators that are well-versed in pedestrian safety that could either do presentations or do street team, work there, but we'll react to, the request for help.
Thanks, Charles. I'll definitely keep you guys in mind. Are there any other projects or programs that are going on around the region that people want to give an update on?
I continue, this is Ivan. I am continuing to work with Menans on the third of 3 projects. 2 of them have been built. We had proposed that 20 years ago, those 3 projects. The third one is a potential underpass, probably more likely a waterway, where culverts right now carry the little river underneath the I-787 interstate. we were asking for money from DEC for culvert re-examination programs. Sandy has been copied with some of the emails that have gone back and forth on this.
Thanks, second. Is there any other project updates?
I'm kind of curious about the 787 redesign activity.
I mean, so a lot of, I'm sure you saw in the news, in the state budget, some funding was secured to study the feasibility of removing or reimagining 787. That was, part of the New York State budget, and there's not, Cdtc doesn't have any additional information on that yet. Obviously 787 has been one of those pieces of infrastructure in the region that has been discussed and a pretty hot topic for quite some time. Reconnecting communities to the riverfront has been a big ticket item in New Visions for the last several New Visions plans. So we'll definitely be following this and provide updates as we have information.
It's a $5 million item, so it is bound to be a significant study. Its components are not clear yet.
Yes, but as Cdtc, to the extent that Cdtc is involved and keeping the public updated, we'll definitely do so. But right now, we do not have any additional information than what you've probably seen maybe in the news.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other updates, I look forward to seeing you May 10th. I hope that you're able to join us wherever we may end up meeting. And in June, as of right now, we'll plan to have a hybrid type of meeting. So I do hope that some folks will, if they are available, will join us again here in the office for meetings. It has been a really long time. So thank you for logging on today, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a good week.